You generously handed your ticket to a woman you didn't know. Nothing seems more paramount than the company's affairs. Unfortunately, you've been terminated. Even when the boss told me I was fired, I wasn't too shocked. Instead, I felt like I had pictured the true corporate culture of this company and almost blurted out, "I'm better off without this place anyway." Just then, "Excuse me," the panicked manager rushed into the boss's office. "Sir, our company is being featured as breaking news on TV. What's going on? Who is this person?" The faces of COO and my boss turned pale as they looked at the DV screen. The person on the DV screen was me. My name is Arlo. Here in New York City, I work at a healthcare products and related service provider. I belong to the sales department. Guess I have another membership quota to meet this month. Sales is rewarding but tough, that's the only way to put it. Our company's gym, based on the concept of a gym anyone can easily access at any time, has been expanding rapidly due to the recent health boom, making our business grow fast. The idea of easily accessible for everyone was revolutionary in the world of gyms, which used to be seen as intimidating to join. But there was a fatal flaw in this aggressive business strategy. What's going on with your gym? It's always so crowded, I can barely use the machines. Why is it fully booked for the month? I joined because you promised I could avail at any time. Despite the demand, there were simply too many members for one gym. Lately, we've been receiving daily complaints from dissatisfied customers. Still, all we hear from the top is, "Increase the membership numbers." Are we really going to keep adding members in this situation? I've been growing doubtful of the company's willingness to address the concerns raised by the customers. One day, I couldn't hold back any longer and decided to talk to the sales manager. "Excuse me, manager, I have something I'd like to discuss." "What now?" "In the middle of all this chaos?" "Make it quick." "Yes, sorry," as the manager, not even looking up from his paperwork, dismissively gestures. I sigh and start speaking. "Manager, you're aware of the alarming numbers of complaints from customers, right?" "Yeah, so what?" "I think we're adding to our membership numbers recklessly. We should seriously address the complaints and work on solutions." "Oh, Arlo, you don't get it. That's the problem with the younger generation," the manager interrupts me, scratching his head in irritation. "Whatever we do, it costs money. We need to increase sales before we can think about solutions." Well, that might be true, but still, just focus on increasing the membership, you worthless employee. Ramp up the sales pitches to all the media for advertising. Got it? Understood. It was like talking to a wall, but when the higher-ups say this, there's not much else to do. I swallowed my frustration and quietly returned to my work, following the manager's orders. I started pitching our ads to various media outlets. Perhaps because of these efforts, some good news came my way. "Really? Is that true?" "Yes, we're interested in a tie-up with an RTV program." The caller was from the Alaska Broadcasting Company. Excitingly, they were considering not just commercial films but also a TV show collaboration. "Thank you so much. We'd be delighted to work with you." "Thank you, but the show's schedule is quite tight. We'd like to meet as soon as possible if that's all right with you." "Any time is fine. I'll be there." "Thank you. I'll send you the schedule by mail right away." "Thank you very much. I appreciate it." Even after hanging up, my hands were still shaking with surprise and joy. All right, can't just sit around now. A DV collaboration could be a significant achievement. Trying to contain my excitement, I booked a flight to head for the DV station's meeting. And then the day of the big meeting with the TV station arrived. I got to the airport early to catch my flight. I've got quite some time before departure. Maybe I was too eager as I arrived at the airport earlier than I expected. I was thinking about going to a nearby coffee shop to review my presentation materials when I noticed something. "Excuse me, are there any seats available on the flight to Anchorage? I really need to get on the next flight." A woman was desperately pleading with the airline counter staff. "Just a moment, please." The staff, looking confused, fiddled with their computer and wore a troubled expression. "I'm sorry, but all the flights to Anchorage today are fully booked." "Oh no, there's still time before the next flight, and we can put you on a waiting list for cancellations." "All right, please do that." After completing some simple procedures, the woman walked away from the counter looking unsteady. I wonder if she is okay. I found myself watching her. She sat down on a bench, covering her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. It looked like she was crying. The next flight to Anchorage, huh? I glanced at the ticket in my hand. No, that's not right. I was here for work, after all. Chiding myself for even thinking about it, I started walking towards the coffee shop. As I passed by the woman sitting on the bench, her cell phone rang. "Hello, Jess, it's booked. I'm on a waiting list." "Oh my, still unconscious?" "I'm okay. I'll try to get back today." Yes. Her trembling voice was audible as she spoke to the person on the other end of the phone. What happened? An accident or an illness? Someone important to her seemed to be in serious trouble. Oh, that's why she was so desperate. Stop it, don't think about it anymore. Shaking my head to clear these thoughts, I went past the woman. I bought a cup of coffee, sat down, and spread out my materials. I wanted to focus, but I couldn't stop thinking about the woman nearby. I can't do anything for her, murmuring to myself. I started to question, is that really true? I had what she needed right now. The more I thought, the more my heart raced, the more restless I felt. Come on, what am I even thinking? Unable to sit still any longer, I downed my lukewarm coffee, gathered my things, and left the coffee shop. I retraced my steps back. The woman was still sitting on the same bench. "Excuse me." Ah, she looked up in surprise when I spoke to her. Her eyes, wide open, were wet with tears. "Are you all right?" "I'm sorry, yes, I'm fine. She tried to put on a brave face, smiling, but her trembling lips betrayed her distress. The last bit of my hesitation, telling me not to get involved, vanished at that moment. What happened? I'm sorry. I saw you over there at the counter earlier. You were waiting for a ticket cancellation, right? My daughter was involved in a traffic accident and taken to the hospital." "Your daughter?" "I came here from Alaska for a business trip. My return flight was scheduled for tomorrow, so I couldn't get back immediately. I can't be there for my daughter." She choked up mid-sentence and started crying. I hurriedly pulled out a handkerchief and handed it to her. "Please use this." "I'm sorry. Can you stand up? I have a ticket for the next flight to Anchorage. Let's change the passenger name to yours at the counter. But hurry, it's almost boarding time." I took her arm to help her stand and walked her to the counter. "Excuse me, I'd like to transfer my ticket to her, please." "Yes, sir. You're the lady on the waiting list, right?" "Just a moment, please." The counter staff, apparently concerned about her as well, began the transfer process swiftly without hesitation. "Wait, what about you?" "It's okay for me, but not for you. You need to go now, or else you'll surely regret it." "Thank you so much." "Thank you." She looked somehow relieved from the worry, tears streaming down her face. I gently shook my head and handed her the ticket. "Go to your daughter, please." "Thank you so much. Here, this is my card. May I have yours?" "Of course." We exchanged business cards. Somewhat belatedly, her name turned out to be Sarah. "You're Arlo, right? Thank you so much. I'll never forget this kindness. I'll make sure to thank you properly once things settle down." "No need for thanks. Just take care, and I hope your daughter will be okay, Jess." "Thank you. Thank you so much." I watched her repeatedly turn back with tearful eyes until she disappeared from view. Well, I really did it. I sighed, watching the plane I was supposed to be on take off from the lounge. Strangely, I felt no regret. Switching gears, I called the DV station I was supposed to have a meeting with. Hello, this is Arlo. Arlo, good to hear from you. Is your flight on schedule? Actually, about that. I only told the DV station representative about missing the flight. I see. That's a bit of a problem. I'm truly sorry for this sudden change. No need to apologize. I understand something must have come up. However, we'll need to reschedule our tie-up discussion. I'll contact you once we have a new plan. But please understand that the project might be cancelled. Of course. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. After a polite goodbye, I hung up. After a short wait, all right, time to head back to the office and face the music. My workday was far from over. Resolving to deal with whatever came next, I decided to head back to the office from the airport. Arlo, do you realize what you've done? My manager shouted at me when I reported back to the office. You missed a tie-up with a DV station. Do you have any idea how big of an opportunity that was? I'm very sorry. And what's this about giving your ticket to someone in need, Arlo? What were you doing at the airport? This is work. Don't mix personal matters with work. You're absolutely right. I have no excuse. Seriously, what were you thinking? I knew I was completely at fault for this situation. With the manager still furious, I kept my head bowed. Hey, Arlo? Yes? I'll be reporting this matter to the CO, so be prepared. Yes, I understand. That's enough, Arlo. Just go home for today. I can't concentrate with you around. Yes, I'm very sorry for what happened. Excuse me, I apologized deeply one last time and began to pack up to go home. My colleagues looked at me with concern, but none of them spoke up. I'm sorry for any trouble I caused everyone. I'll be heading out now. After I made another apology at the door, I left the office. The next day, I was called to the CO's office first thing in the morning. It seemed my mishap had reached the CO's ears sooner than I expected. I knocked on the CO's office door. By this time, I was ready to face the consequences. CO, it's Arlo. Come in. Excuse me, I entered the CO's office. The CO, looking stern, was leaning on his desk. I walked up and took a deep breath. CO, I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience I've caused. So, you understand that you did something wrong? Yes. So why did you do it? Are you trying to damage my company's reputation? I had no such intention. Then what was your intention? Well, could I make him understand if I explain the situation? With a glimmer of hope, I recounted the entire incident at the airport. Your name was Arlo, right? Yes. Aren't you misunderstanding something? Our company doesn't run a charity. I apologize. I was wrong. If apologies were enough, things would be easy, but they're not. We don't need someone with your mindset in our company. The CEO handed me a document. It was a termination notice. Complete the handover within the period stated here. Make sure your final task is done well. As I stood up, the CEO patted my shoulder lightly. I understand. I'll accept it without any words. Unfortunately, there was no room for defense, and the CEO urged me to leave his office. So it's come to this, huh? Though the outcome was arguably the worst possible, I had no regrets. This was the right thing to do, wasn't it? I felt strangely liberated and found myself reminiscing about the past, the days shortly after I had moved to the city to study at the university. Arlo, calm down and listen. A sudden call from my mother. What? The news she delivered plunged my world into darkness. My sister, who had been receiving treatment at the hospital, had passed away. How could this happen? She looked fine when I went home for the holidays. Her condition suddenly deteriorated. Just hours ago, she was okay, but she's gone. Mom, I didn't know what to say to my mother, who couldn't hold back her sobs on the other end of the phone. Hand over the phone, Arlo. Can you hear me, Dad? Arlo, can you come home right away? Yeah, I'll head there right after this. Do that, Arlo. Yeah. In the end, she said she wanted to see you one last time, and then she passed away. My gosh, sorry. No, don't apologize. Just come back safely, okay? I hung up the phone, feeling dazed. Back in my hometown, I used to visit her daily, but after moving, those visits became less frequent. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tears flowed freely. In the end, I couldn't do anything for my sister as her brother. That regret of not being there for my sister's last moments weighed heavily on me. Perhaps that's why, at the airport yesterday, I saw myself in the desperate woman's situation. I hope Sarah is okay. I had no regrets about giving her my plane ticket. I hope she made it in time, and if possible, I wished for her daughter's recovery. My heart was filled with these hopes. A regret like that is better avoided. I hope that her tears would turn into smiles. With these thoughts, I returned to the office to start the handover process. Nearly a month later, after successfully handing over all my responsibilities and clients to my colleagues, I faced my last day at the company without any problems. Thank you for everything. I hummed. Arlo, make sure you say goodbye to the CEO too. Yes, sir. I nodded to him, who spoke without looking at me, and left the office. Then I headed straight to the CEO's office. Today was my last day. I had no regrets or unresolved feelings. CEO, excuse me, I entered the CEO's office as usual. The COO was sitting at his desk. I'm leaving effective today. I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience I caused. Indeed you should. Ideally, I would have liked to demand compensation for the damages, but be thankful I didn't go that far. The CEO let out an exaggerated sigh. Still, you've practically thrown away your career. It's pitiful. I wonder what kind of upbringing leads someone to turn out like you. My parents have nothing to do with this, huh? I wonder, giving your business trip ticket to a stranger, what a ridiculous story. The CEO raised his voice and slammed his hand on the desk. I remained silent, continuing to stare at him. Listen, since you seem unaware, I'll tell you this as a parting gift. In work, nothing is more important than a company that you don't understand. This is precisely why people like you get fired despite the barrage of criticism. I wasn't too shaken. Instead, I felt like I had pictured the true corporate culture of this company and almost blurted out, I'm better off without this place anyway. However, before I could speak, I was interrupted. Excuse me, the manager rushed into the CEO's office in a fluster. What now? You're making a racket, said the CEO. Sorry, CEO, but this is urgent. Please check the news right now, urged by the flustered manager. The CEO turned on the DV in his office with an irritated gesture. The screen showed a breaking news story that seemed to be a positive piece. So this man gave you the ticket? Yes, thanks to him, I could rush to my daughter's side. The voice sounded familiar. I instinctively looked up at the DV screen. There was Sarah holding a little girl and a man standing beside her. Sarah. I was startled to see her, and even the CEO and manager looked shocked, their eyes wide open, their gaze fixed on the middle-aged man standing next to Ellis. This man is, indeed, it's him. I'm sure it's him. I've met him a few times in TV-related work. He's the former producer Jacob who used to work at a DV station in the city. The CEO audibly swallowed. On the DV screen, Anna was smiling as she responded to the interviewer. Someone from this company gave me his ticket. Thanks to him, I was able to reach my daughter. This is the company that's behind the popular gym chain, right? I hear your father has connections with this company. Then the microphone turned to the man next to Anna. It turns out he was her father. Yes, it's true. I later found out he was supposed to have a business meeting with my company. What a coincidence, absolutely. But he didn't know that fact. I hope this news feature lets everyone know, despite the controversies surrounding that company, they have such amazing employees, he said firmly, and Sarah, nodding and smiling beside him, continued, as long as they have employees like him, the company will be fine. I'm sure the bad rumors will disappear soon. Anna, with a beaming smile, hugged the little girl in her arms and added, I'll visit soon to express my gratitude. Please wait for me. With that, she waved her hand, and the screen switched to an advertisement. In the CEO's office, there was an awkward silence. The manager and the CEO were speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear. We're sorry, Arlo. Like this, please forgive us. Please show us mercy, they pleaded. Hold on a second, forgive us? Mercy? What for? I was a bit taken aback by their desperation but curious about what they were about to say. We had no idea that the woman you helped was the daughter of Mr. Kit. I'm sorry for overstepping, but please let us withdraw your dismissal, Arlo. No, Mr. Arlo, the CEO is going this far. Come on, you must be relieved not to be fired, right? It was a complete turnaround. They probably realized that my being fired would look bad now that Mr. Kit knew about it. As I stared down at them in disbelief, the CEO looked up at me with a sly grin. How about it? If you want, we can offer you any position. You can even take his place if you want. Excuse me? I watched in amazement as the CEO and manager desperately tried to win me over. I let out an exaggerated sigh. I've already been fired, so it's no longer my concern. No, wait, please. I quickly sidestepped the CEO and manager as they tried to cling to my feet and said, then, thank you for everything. I left the CEO's office with a smile, ignoring their shouts behind me. The day after I left the company with a clear conscience, I received a message from Sarah. She was in the city and invited me for a meal as a way of saying thanks. Feeling a bit nervous, I made my way to the designated location. It was a restaurant in a high-end hotel, a place I'd never been to before. Arlo, I really can't thank you enough for what you did. Thanks to you, my daughter is safe and now very healthy. I'm just glad to hear she's doing well. I saw you on TV, your daughter is adorable, just like you. Arlo, you're quite the charmer, aren't you? I hope I'm not getting you in trouble with your husband. I'm single, actually. I got divorced before my daughter was born. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. It's okay, don't worry about it. Anna smiled softly as she sipped her wine. Arlo, did you take the day off from work today? About that, I actually got fired from my job. What? Sorry, after all the praise you gave me on TV. That's terrible. Do you have another job lined up? Not yet, actually. Then would you consider working at the DV station my father is with? Sarah's eyes sparkled as she looked at me earnestly. It's in Alaska though, but I assure you, you won't regret it. Really? Are you sure that's okay? Of course, let me just call my dad and confirm. Ellis quickly pulled out her cell phone, her movements a blend of excitement and urgency. I had only met Sarah twice, yet I'd seen so many sides of her, tears, laughter, and now this flurry of excitement. Arlo, he says you're more than welcome. After finishing the call, Sarah turned to me with a beaming smile, the happiest and most beautiful expression I'd seen on her yet. Time passed, and thanks to Sarah's introduction, I transitioned to a new job at the DV station in Alaska where her father was a producer. Ridiculous firing a guy like you. That company is doomed. Upon learning about my dismissal, Sarah's father used his influence to cancel the nearly finalized partnership deal his station had with the company where once I was an employee. It made sense, after all, I had been the one who initiated and developed that project. Meanwhile, my old nest, plagued by a pileup of customer complaints and an increasing number of cancellations, was now teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. It's like they got what was coming to them, indeed, such a shame. Don't worry about it, Sarah, all right? She looked downcast, and I offered her a reassuring smile. As time went by, Sarah and I spent more and more time together, and now we were in a relationship, considering marriage. Ellis, there's something I want to ask you. What is it? I've been thinking, meeting Ellis that day, it might have been destiny. Destiny? I'm glad you're smiling, Sarah. Your smile is what I love the most. Arlo, you always know just what to say. We looked at each other and shared a light-hearted laugh. I promised myself that I would make Sarah, her beloved daughter, and any future children we might have happy, a vow to make up for the sister I couldn't protect, to cherish them always.
Growing up, life often threw me curveballs. My early years were a chaotic mix of struggles and fleeting joys. My family wasn't well off, and our neighborhood wasn't the safest. Despite the hardships, I learned resilience and the importance of finding small joys amidst the chaos. My childhood taught me survival and the value of genuine connections, laying the foundation for my perseverance later in life. As I entered adulthood, those lessons became even more relevant. I navigated various jobs, striving for stability and purpose. Relationships came and went, each teaching me about trust, betrayal, and self-worth. By my 30s, I had a clearer understanding of myself and my goals. Yet nothing prepared me for the whirlwind of events leading me to the brink of a new chapter in life. A scream of pain echoed in my mind. My scalp throbbed, and my skin felt like it was being pricked by needles. I tried to open one eye, but the brightness felt like a supernova, piercing my brain like a runaway freight train driven by a furious, possibly inebriated Ted Nugent. A horrible screeching sound built up, like cat nails on an endless chalkboard. "Sweet Jesus, Buddha, Shiva, anyone!" "Cthulhu," I muttered. I retched, but had nothing left to vomit. The screeching coalesced into something recognizable as a human voice. I forced my eyes open and tried to understand the blurry form above me. Shutting my eyes and reopening them, I saw a pair of feet in pink toenail polish and cotton candy slippers. Okay, a woman's feet, I thought. Probably not Leonard from Trailer 6, who sometimes liked to feel pretty when drunk. These feet were too small, lacked toe fungus, and were attached to well-formed legs without his moles or Rick Astley tattoo. The voice began making sense in Spanish, but my limited Spanish from Sesame Street didn't cover what was being said. I caught words like 32 donkeys and your grandmother, likely not an invitation to a Tupperware party. Realizing I was lying on my side in the trailer park's white gravel dust, I pushed myself to sit, dry heaving from nausea and a massive headache. The screeching stopped and the feet jumped back. I looked up to see things had worsened. Rosa Rafaela Rodriguez glared at me, clutching her pink robe and pointing accusingly. Her chihuahua stood ready to attack. Most avoided Rosa. Leonard called her the angriest woman on the planet. I avoided her since she reacted to my friendly greeting as if I tried to kidnap her. Along with court notices, lawyer bills, parole supervision fees, and utility final notices, I got an earful from her. Giving up, I turned and walked away, which only fueled her fury. Despite avoiding her, I enjoyed watching her outside in her transparent pink robe, brightening my otherwise bleak existence in our mostly abandoned trailer park. She drew herself up and launched into me again. Ignoring her, I struggled to my feet, pushing an umbrella off. She stopped, looked me over with disgust, and switched to English. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I looked down and saw I was standing in the rose bushes outside her trailer, which explained the pain. More troubling, I was unclothed and painted green, white, and red. A small crowd, including Leonard in overalls, Maisie looking like Danny DeVito in drag, and Delbert and Tawny in matching sweats with 5 o'clock shadows, watched with amusement. I grabbed an umbrella to cover myself, sending Rosa's chihuahua into a barking frenzy. "You scared my little Liam," Rosa snapped, picking up the dog. I shook my head, regretting it immediately. "Liam? Who names a chihuahua Liam?" "She likes Liam Hemsworth," Maisie chimed in, fanning herself. "I prefer Chris Hemsworth, but I wouldn't kick Liam out of bed for eating cookies, if you know what I mean," Maisie added. Rosa's shriek made me cringe, expecting the glass to shatter. The maintenance guy who could fix windows had disappeared a while ago. Rosa, pointing at me, demanded, "You think that's funny?" "No," I replied. "Chris and Liam would be horrified." Maisie huffed, folding her arms. "Not what I meant. You," she clarified. Rosa launched into another Spanish tirade, likely not a history lesson. Her robe fell open, revealing she wore nothing underneath. The chihuahua pawed at her, pulling the robe further open, showing off a well-groomed heart shape. "Never seen a naked woman before," Rosa snapped. "Not many built like you. I love the heart," I replied. She closed her robe, annoyed. "Clean your vomit out of my rose bushes, a-hole." I looked down at the mess. "I'll get to it this afternoon." "Yeah, right," Rosa replied, disbelieving. "You stole my heart," I said, nodding at her robe flapping open. She tried to close it, exposing a nipple before covering up again. "What?" she questioned. "Nothing. I'm staying until the show is over," I said. She growled and stormed off, her robe flying up to reveal her bare bum. The crowd dispersed, leaving Leonard, Maisie, and me. "That's quite a woman," Leonard muttered, scratching himself. "For God's sake, Leonard, she's half your age," Maisie said. "Yeah, she is," Leonard grinned. "Pervert," Maisie retorted. "Yep," Leonard agreed, still looking where Rosa had disappeared. "Hey, Maisie," I called, still watching where Rosa had disappeared. "Joseph, is it Sunday?" "It's Sunday," Maisie confirmed. "Good. Then I'm not late for work," I said. Maisie looked puzzled. "What does Mexicano honorario mean?" "Honorary Mexican," I replied, seeing the letters written on my chest. "I'm going to kill Miguel." Dragging myself to my trailer, I retrieved my key from under a flower pot. Inside, my furniture consisted of 2 lawn chairs, a thrift shop radio, and a milk crate. I put on some shorts and fetched several buckets of water for Rosa's garden, not wanting to ask to use her hydrant. I spent the rest of the day fighting my hangover with gallons of water and Tylenol, setting my alarm before passing out. I was at the gate before sunrise when Miguel pulled up in the old school bus. "Hey, Jose," he grinned. "It's Joseph, you a-hole," I corrected him. "It's Jose now. We made you an honorary Mexican, remember?" Miguel reminded me. "Yeah, I saw the label. You didn't need to use a permanent marker. I think my blood was replaced with tequila," I said. "And mezcal," Miguel nodded. "You left me at the gate naked," I accused him. "You had a sombrero," he said smugly. I glared as I sat behind him. "I woke up in Rosa's garden." "Is that a metaphor?" "'Cause I bet her rose garden is amazing," Miguel joked. "No, idiot. I threw up on her actual roses," I clarified. "Lucky you're alive. She has a crazy temper. Her ex-husband cheated, and she stabbed both him and his mistress. She's dangerous," Miguel explained. "Why'd you do that to me?" I asked, still annoyed. "Honor. You're the first gringo crew boss who doesn't think we'll steal everything," he answered. "We're harvesting tomatoes. What is there to steal?" I questioned. "It's pronounced Jesus. We like your common sense. It's rare," Miguel said. Though I was technically the crew boss, Miguel ran everything. I just stayed out of the way and picked tomatoes with the others. "You could be the boss, you know," Miguel suggested. "No way. I need you to take the blame if anything goes missing," I replied. He repeated this in Spanish to the crew, making them laugh all the way to the fields. 3 hours into our 14-hour day, my parole officer showed up. "Joseph, just checking in to make sure you made it to work," Pio Heinen sneered. "I'm here," I replied. "It's a miracle. You know the difference between a parolee and an inmate?" "Just one mess up and you're a big mess," Pio said. "I'm meeting my parole conditions. I'm working, I'm clean, and I'm not involved in anything," I responded. "You've had 3 jobs in 6 months. Now you're working with a bunch of wetbacks," he said, glancing at Miguel, who pretended not to understand English. "You'll never make another 18 months. "I lost those jobs because you interfered," I accused. "They needed to know what kind of loser they'd hired," he sneered. "Time for a pill test. You have 2 hours to get to the center." "I don't have a car, and it's almost 2 hours away," I explained. "You know the deal. You fail or miss it, you're back inside." He chuckled and left. Miguel walked up beside me. "Sure you're not Mexican, Jose?" Miguel asked. "Pretty sure. Unless Mom was with the gardener," I joked. "You might want to ask, just to be sure," Miguel suggested. "Why?" I inquired. "Because that man wants you on the other side of a wall," he said, staring after Pio's car. "Jesus. You're pronouncing it wrong. Remember, you're Mexican now," I said. "Alejandro will drive you to the test center. I don't have time to train a new crew boss," Miguel stated. We arrived at the test center with 15 minutes to spare. I had to pry my hands off the seat, not knowing you could drift a bus in heavy traffic. On the way back, Alejandro chatted a lot, but he didn't speak English. My Spanish was limited to counting, naming colors, and some obscenities, so we didn't get far. At dinner, Miguel sat next to me. "Saturday night, you started to tell me how you ended up here but passed out before explaining how a big-shot stockbroker ended up picking tomatoes." Not much to tell. An SEC investigation hit my firm. I didn't think it involved me, but I was locked out. Turns out, there was insider trading under a fake account I had access to. I got blamed, but they couldn't prove it, so they pulled my Series 7 license, I explained. "You still ended up in jail," Miguel noted. "Yeah, they found cocaine in my car during the investigation. It wasn't mine, but I couldn't prove it. They used it to pressure me about the missing money. Tens of millions. I got 3 years but only served 6 months in county jail due to overcrowding, I continued. You sure you didn't take the money? If you did, I have a cousin, Miguel suggested. If I had millions, I'd be in Mexico by now, I replied. So where'd the pills come from? He asked. I thought they were planted, but I picked up high-end clients from the airport a lot. One could have left it. Bad luck. Everything fell apart. My wife stuck around until I was sentenced, then divorced me, taking our savings, I said. What a witch, Miguel commented. I wasn't totally numb to it, but I had enough cheap tequila to take the edge off. She works at the same company, so she's lucky she didn't get fired. That job means a lot to her, I explained. True love conquers all, huh? Miguel said sarcastically. True love doesn't pay the bills, I replied. What were you making? Miguel inquired. With bonuses, almost $500,000 a year. Now I'm barely over minimum wage. She took everything, I said. Couldn't you find it? He asked. She's an accountant, and they're good at hiding money. It'd take money, time, and lawyers to dig it out, and I don't have any of those. Maybe someday I can look into it and sue for my share, I responded. Miguel shook his head sadly. I've seen your paycheck. It's going to be a while. Against my better judgment, I let Miguel talk me into going to another bar on Saturday night. You need to get out, Jose. Have some fun, Miguel urged. Like last week, where I wished I could die on Sunday? I retorted. Despite arguing, I climbed into the back seat. 8 guys could fit in the old brown Bonneville as long as no one worried about seatbelts. We're going somewhere more fun this time, Miguel promised. I thought that was your favorite bar, I said. They didn't appreciate us enough, he replied. Did we get thrown out? I asked. Maybe, Miguel admitted. Didn't your cousin own that place? I questioned. Distant cousin, he grinned. Besides, this club has dancing. When we arrived at the parking lot, I glanced at him. A salsa club? Isn't that Cuban? I asked. This place has hot chicks wearing very little. I'd come here if it was a waltz club, he replied. You do know how to dance, right? I inquired. Yes, I can do the polka and the waltz, I said. Seriously? Miguel asked, surprised. I can also tango, foxtrot, salsa, jive, and more. Beth and I used to hit dance clubs religiously, I elaborated. Thank God, I thought we were getting thrown out again, he said, relieved. I laughed. I'll buy your first beer. Domestic, Miguel requested. Yeah, I know. I've seen your paycheck, I responded. We had a blast. The club had 2 bachelorette parties and 3 divorce parties, making the ratio of women to men over 2 to 1. Most women were already tipsy when we arrived. I was dragged onto the floor by 2 divorcees, a maid of honor, 3 bridesmaids, and one mother of the bride who copped a feel so fast I hadn't finished my drink. I finally sat down, watching Miguel get dragged off by the mother of the bride. Holding my Modelo Especial, I scanned the packed floor, filled with more bare skin than a nudist colony. I spotted a woman with a full, toothsome behind in skin-tight jeans. She was talking to someone at a table, bent over to hear in the pandemonium. Every time she moved, my heart, among other things, moved with her. Damn, that was one fine bum. I was still entranced when Miguel stumbled to our table and sat next to me. Yokuda warned me, a-hole, Miguel said. Yeah, she was a handful. That cougar got my zipper down. She mentioned she was divorced like 6 times, he replied, pausing to follow my gaze. Damn, that's some fine... He stopped as the woman straightened and looked at us. Rosa's eyes narrowed as she approached. Miguel raised his hands. Hey man, I just got here, he said loudly enough for Rosa to hear. She ignored him and came right up to me. What do you think you're staring at, you pervert? Rosa demanded. I was about to apologize when a giggling woman in a toy bridal veil fell into the table, dragged by her maid of honor. The maid of honor, with a pink sash, grabbed my arm. She needs to dance with 5 more guys, the maid of honor insisted. I was pulled to my feet and gestured helplessly to Rosa. I'll be back. The bride, less drunk than her bridesmaid, seemed uncomfortable with the game. I tried to be a gentleman. I didn't make it back to the table for 3 more dances, intercepted by another bride, another maid of honor, and a very pretty trans woman who saved me from the cougar. At least dancing with her wasn't like dancing with an aroused octopus. I was heading back to the table when a hand grabbed mine, pulling me back onto the dance floor. Were you ever coming back to your table? Rosa glared at me as we started to dance. She seemed less angry than before. I tried. I had a cold beer back there, but it's probably warm by now, I said. No, I drank it. I was waiting for you to come back and apologize, Rosa responded. Any inclination to apologize vanished. Nonsense. If you didn't want people staring at your bum, you wouldn't paint those jeans on and bend over like that. Rosa's lips tightened, eyes narrowing. That wasn't for your benefit, pervert. I shrugged. I didn't see a reserved sign on it, and I looked pretty close. I expected her to explode, but she chuckled and shook her head. Miguel says you're not as much of an a-hole as I thought. He said it was his fault. They didn't tie me down and force me to drink, I said, trying to remember. At least I don't think they did, but he could have not painted me and dropped me off unclothed. She smiled. I didn't expect you to actually come back and clean up the vomit. I wish you'd told me that. Dragging those buckets around with a hangover was awful. The dance with Rosa was pleasant, and I felt we had a truce, at least for now. I watched her walk back to her table, enjoying the view. She glanced back, smiled, and mouthed pervert at me. I winked, and she rolled her eyes before sitting down. Miguel looked me over for injuries. Looks like you got away alive. She's your cousin, I said. Yeah, second cousin, Miguel replied. Thanks for putting in a good word, I said. Kinda owed you that, Miguel admitted. Man, you did. A-hole, I said. I managed a week without any mayhem, which was a record. 1 call to my PO, 6 days of work, and no hangover for 2 Sundays in a row. Life was good, so of course it couldn't last. We finished a field early and were heading back before sunset. Hey, Jose, isn't that your parole officer with the blonde woman in that restaurant? Miguel asked. Yeah, that's... I froze. What? Miguel pulled away from the stoplight. That's my ex-wife, I said, noticing Beth's blouse was unbuttoned an awful lot for a friendly lunch. What's she doing with that a-hole? Miguel glanced at me, then focused on the road. Hold on. He stopped the bus, yelled in Spanish to the back, and a bearded guy moved to the front. Miguel opened the door as I started to get up. No, you stay here, Miguel instructed. I need to know what's going on, I protested. Exactly, but you're still pronouncing it wrong. This is Jesus, and he knows you're parole officer. We have a cousin who works there. Maybe we'll get lucky and find out, Miguel said. I wanted to say it was a coincidence, but what were the odds of my ex-wife accidentally meeting my low-life parole officer? I sighed, thinking maybe she was checking up on me. Miguel raised an eyebrow at me. Maybe, but it feels messed up. We rolled out, and Miguel glanced at me in the mirror. I'll come by tonight and let you know what Jesus finds out. I nodded, feeling sick. Jesus didn't find out much, but what he did learn was unsettling. One of the waitresses, a cousin, had noticed Beth all over Fish, who seemed very nervous. She was trying to get him to do something, using seduction. Jesus said if her blouse unbuttoned anymore, she'd need to start on her skirt. Maybe she wants him to go easy on me, I said, though it sounded hollow. You can't be that stupid, Jose. Going easy on you wouldn't make him uncomfortable. He's cool with child aggressors and eliminators. He's got a good reputation, Miguel countered. How do you know? I asked. There aren't many POs around here. I got a cousin who... Miguel started. I waved him off. I have a bad feeling about this. Miguel stared at my peeling linoleum tabletop. You gonna look into it? Yeah, I'll just pull a few grand out of my account for a private eye. I shook my head. I can't afford that. Do private eyes even exist anymore? Miguel grinned. You don't need to. I got a cousin who works in housekeeping at her condo. Jesus, Miguel, how many cousins do you have? I asked. As many as we need. We're everywhere and invisible, he replied. You don't need to do this, I said. He laughed. This is cool. Play detective. Besides, it's what friends do. We went to his cousin Isabel's house. She thought it sounded exciting and fun at first. But when she asked for a picture of Beth, she looked at it, then suddenly forgot English and started speaking rapid-fire Spanish to Miguel. Miguel, what's going on? I asked, sensing something was wrong. He looked pained. Ooh, Jose. Even I know what piota means, Miguel, I said, irritated. Isabel squared up. She's got a couple of guys who visit all the time. We're divorced. I may not like it, but it happens, I said, lying. I hated it. Isabel looked at me stonily. You've been divorced for 4 years? My mouth went dry. What do you mean? I've worked there for 4 years, and she's had one guy coming over the whole time, Isabel revealed. I felt oddly relieved. I can't be her. I was home every night. They come over at lunchtime. I'm sure it's her. Skinny bum witch, Isabel said. Another guy started showing up 2 years ago. Miguel pulled out his phone and showed a picture of Fish. This guy? Miguel asked. She shook her head. No, the new guy is a big blonde, maybe a weightlifter. The long-term guy is thin, dark-haired, jittery. You gotta be kidding me, I said, trying to sit but ending up on the floor. That sounds like Alan Voorhees from accounting. Crap. Isabel looked at me sadly. You didn't suspect? How could I? Her office is 5 minutes away. Mine was 40 minutes in good traffic, I explained. Miguel grabbed my shoulder. You're not going to do something crazy, right? You'll break your parole. I shook my head. Go after them? My martial arts training is walking into spider webs and going full kung fu theater. I can't afford a PI and screwing around isn't illegal. There's nothing I can do. Miguel shrugged, knowing I was right. I expected Fish to show up with more demands, but he didn't. 2 weeks later, just as we were near the city limits, Miguel got a call. He cut across 3 lanes of traffic and sped back to the trailer park. He stopped directly in front of my trailer. Rosa, in her skimpy pink robe, stood cross-armed, glaring at Fish. Leonard and Maisie watched, fascinated. I barely stepped off the bus before Rosa shifted her attention to me. Did you give this idiot permission to go into your trailer? He came in right after the bus left, Rosa demanded. It's a condition of parole, Fish said, glaring. You have no expectation of privacy. Yeah, but you need reasonable suspicion. Otherwise, it's maltreatment. I read the terms. I can ask for another officer to be present, I countered. His lip twitched. That's for female parolees who want a female officer. It doesn't say that. It just says I can have one. I decided to drop my bomb. What did Beth want? His face paled. I don't need this. He turned and walked to his car. I followed. What's going on, Fish? I asked. He opened the door and looked at me, visibly aged. How would I know? He slammed the door, started the car, then rolled down the window. I'm transferring you to Anderson. I don't want any part of this. Part of what, damn it? I shouted. He flicked something out the window and stared at me. Your ex-wife wants you back in prison. Watch your back. She'll do anything. He drove off. Leonard picked up a package from the dirt. Oxy in 4 bags, probably 20 tabs. That'd be intent to distribute, Leonard said. Miguel shook his head silently. I closed my eyes. Rosa moved closer, her scent calming me. She watched Fish's car disappear. He was going to plant that in your trailer? Rosa asked. I nodded, barely able to speak. You'd have gone back to prison? She continued. I nodded again. It would be to a real prison this time, with real gangs. I shivered, and Rosa grabbed my arm. Are you okay? She asked softly. Not really, I admitted. Why does your ex want you in prison? You're not stalking her, right? Rosa asked, concerned. I don't even have a car. Miguel drives me everywhere. How could I stalk her? I replied, trying to focus. Somehow, Rosa holding my arm helped me focus. Something's going on, but I don't know what. We're divorced. She got everything, and I haven't been near her. I took a deep breath and told Rosa how I ended up divorced and on parole. She looked puzzled. She tried to screw that guy into putting you in prison? Rosa asked incredulously. Seems like it, I confirmed. She must really hate you, Rosa said, shaking her head. I didn't do anything. She was the one cheating, and I didn't even know it, I said, feeling the weight of it all. Rosa's lips twisted attractively. You didn't have to do anything. She might blame you for her actions. Women, you know. Her big brown eyes locked on mine. He's right. You need to watch your back. She hates you that much and isn't stopping now. I felt exhausted. The idea that Beth hated me was sickening. I looked at Miguel. Do you have any cousins in Bergman Towers? That's where Beth works, I asked. He grinned. What can I say, man? We're everywhere. I'll also tell Isabel to get pictures of any visitors she gets at home, Miguel said. Maisie, wearing Leonard's overalls, peered at Fish's disappearing car. Leonard and I will keep an eye on your trailer, but you should install a latch with a padlock, she suggested. I felt Rosa let go and turned to her. You called Miguel? I asked. She nodded. You saved me, I said gratefully. She looked uncertain for a second, then smirked. You spend all your time watching my bum. I figured I could watch yours for a change, she teased. Miguel rolled his eyes. Yours is a lot more interesting than his, he quipped. Rosa looked up. God, I hope so. If it isn't, I spend too much time at the gym. She winked and slapped her bum. I blinked and dragged my eyes back to hers. Where do you work anyway? I asked. Crestridge Medical Center. I'm an LPN. Pay isn't great, but the insurance is good, Rosa replied. I pretended to study her bum. And it obviously has a great gym, I commented. She smiled smugly and wiggled a little. Damn right, she said. Miguel looked at the bus. We got a field of tomatoes waiting, Jose, he reminded me. I nodded. Yeah, thanks again, Rosa. You saved me, I said. I'm glad I could help. Let me know what's going on, okay? She said. She walked away toward her trailer, letting the wind play with her robe. Wow, Maisie muttered, scratching herself through the overalls. Sop that up with a biscuit. Leonard rolled his eyes. For God's sake, she's half your age. Maisie grinned. Yeah, she is. Pervert, Leonard muttered. Yep, Maisie replied with a satisfied nod. It took Isabel 6 days to get pictures of both of Beth's regular visitors. We gathered in her living room as she showed them to us. One was Voorhees, whom I barely noticed at Beth's office. I never imagined him sneaking over and sleeping with her while I was at work. The other guy was a mystery. Big, blonde, with a crew cut, wearing a decent suit and carrying a briefcase. I didn't recognize him at all. Miguel looked at me. I shook my head. Nothing. Maybe he works for your old company, Isabel suggested, clearly enjoying her spy role. No, I've never seen him, I replied. What about at your wife's office? Isabel asked, eager to continue the investigation. I visited there a few times. I recognized Voorhees, didn't I? The brokers were in my building, but the support staff was in the headquarters, I said. Miguel looked disappointed. I have a cousin who does security there. Really? I was starting to think Miguel's family tree was enormous. He nodded, frowned, and pulled out his phone. Let me text him, he said. Seconds later, he had a response. We can drop by and he'll take a look. As we headed out, Isabel's husband spoke quietly to Miguel, who chuckled softly. Isabel's husband wants us to keep investigating, Miguel said. Why? He hasn't even been involved, I asked, puzzled. Isabel enjoys it. She's more energized when she gets home from work now, Miguel explained. Wait, so I began. Yeah, she's had a fantasy about being a detective. She even bought handcuffs and a fingerprint kit, Miguel said, grinning. Stop. I don't want to know, I interrupted. Miguel laughed. But it's really... Dear God, Miguel, just stop, or I'll tell you about Leonard and Maisie and the spatula, I warned. Ugh, that's nasty. You win, Miguel conceded. We arrived at a small apartment building. Miguel led me to the 3rd floor and knocked on a green door. A powerful red-haired giant opened it. Miguel introduced us. Jose, this is my cousin Bjorn. He manages the security team at your ex-wife's building. They hired him from the NYPD, Miguel introduced. Miguel, he doesn't look very Mexican, I said, puzzled. Yeah, well, he's Norwegian, Miguel explained. Bjorn sighed. Swedish, Miguel. Yeah, bork, 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 Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, whatever. Miguel shrugged. Bjorn waved us in with a smile. Miguel's still mad about that FIFA match last year. Oh, not that again. You got lucky once, Miguel retorted. Bjorn looked thoughtful. Got lucky on a $100 bet? Get lucky with your sister, man, Miguel shot back. She's taller than me. She'd have to hold you by the feet and use you like a toy. How long can you hold your breath? Maybe I'll give her a call, Bjorn said, grinning. Miguel winced comically. Moron. So where's Kelsey? She's the highlight of visiting you. Bjorn handed us beers. She's stuck in traffic. Had a gig on the east side. Miguel pointed to a picture of Bjorn with a cheerful, pale woman. Kelsey's a clown. Like, a real one. Went to clown school and everything. Academy. It's Clown Academy, Bjorn corrected. She's a medical clown now, working in children's wards at hospitals. I met her in New York when she was a busker doing street magic. She got stuck there when her circus shut down. I arrested her. Seriously? I sipped my beer, intrigued. Yeah, she fought with a mime and I had to arrest them both, Bjorn said. Miguel snickered. Did you keep a straight face when you told the mime he had the right to remain silent? It took 3 tries. Then I searched Kelsey, found a dozen balloon animals, rubber chickens, a joy buzzer, 6 giant lollipops, 2 bulb horns, and about 50 yards of handkerchiefs tied together. The last one had a red lace strip tied to it. It took 15 minutes and drew a huge crowd. She made nearly $600 in tips. Hell of a way to meet. I savored another sip. Yeah, she found me on duty a few days later, gave me her number, and demanded a date. The door opened and a cheerful clown walked in. Not creepy, but bouncy and cute. Hey, Miguel, nacho cheese Doritos. She grinned at me. It's the only Spanish I know. Her silliness was infectious, and I laughed. She leaned over and studied me intently. Bjorn giving you some line of nonsense about me? She asked, raising her hands. He tells everyone I'm a clown. You are in clown makeup and carrying a rubber chicken, I pointed out. She held up the chicken. Dinner. And maybe I overdid the eyeshadow this morning. She deadpanned, then grinned. Anyway, it was only 43 handkerchiefs, not 50, and he loves the clown thing. She spun into a pirouette and slid into Bjorn's lap. Don't you, babe? He kissed her, and she spun out of his lap. Be right back. Gotta get the makeup off. Bjorn watched her leave, then turned serious. The text sounded urgent. What's up? Jose has a problem. Someone is trying to set him up and he doesn't know why, Miguel explained. Bjorn eyed me. He looks more like a Joseph than a Jose to me. Miguel, I corrected. He tipped his bottle toward me. I have strict instructions to keep you out of the complex, so I hope that's not the help you're looking for. What's the problem? It took about 15 minutes to explain, and Kelsey joined us with a beer. Sounds like a mess. Does your ex hate you that much? She asked. I shrugged. No reason for it, as far as I know. What are you trying to do now? Bjorn inquired. We're trying to figure out who this is. Miguel showed Bjorn a picture of the blonde guy with Beth. Seen this guy? Bjorn nodded. Yeah, he's been around, not as much lately. Didn't know he knew Beth. Never saw him with Voorhees either. So who is he? I asked. Evan Batchelder. He tried to intimidate me when he first showed up. He's an SEC investigator, Bjorn revealed. Miguel and I were quiet on the way back to the trailer park. He stopped at the gate. So, not all your cousins are really cousins, I remarked. He shrugged. You have the family you're born with, and the family you choose. And Rosa? I asked. She's really my second cousin. Likes you, you know, Miguel said. Weren't you the one who said she might eliminate me? I reminded him. Miguel grinned. She might. Doesn't mean she doesn't like you. His grin faded. What are you going to do? I don't know. Beth seeing the SEC guy is an ethics violation. I'd rather leave it alone, I said. But she won't leave you alone. Don't do anything stupid. You need help. I'll help, okay? Miguel offered. I nodded, unsure. He drove off and I walked through the dim trailer park. Hey, pervert, Rosa called out. I looked over at Rosa's trailer. She was sitting outside. Hey, Rosa, I greeted her. Bad day? She asked. Yeah, everything I thought I knew about my wife is nonsense, I replied. She held up a bottle. Need a drink? Tapatio from Jalisco? I approached. That's the good stuff. Don't waste it on me. Rosa smiled. I've been there with my ex. I can spare some. She patted the chair next to hers. You promised to let me know what's going on. I slumped into the chair and took the bottle. I don't have a cup. Tequila eliminates germs. You won't catch my cooties, she said. I took a sip, more worried about you catching my bad luck. So what happened? She leaned forward. I told her the whole story. What does that mean? She asked. It looks like Beth has been setting me up for years. She was with the SEC guy over a year before the investigation, and Voorhees 2 years before that. She tried to get Fish to put me back in prison, I explained. Rosa pulled her feet up into her chair. How long were you married? Just over 4 years, I replied. So she was with Voorhees practically from the beginning, Rosa noted. We sat quietly for a bit. Think she married you to set you up? She asked. That thought makes me feel even worse, I admitted. She took the bottle, sipped, and handed it back. Manipulating men is what some women do best. She looked at me. What are you going to do? Get revenge? I shook my head. I just want out of this. But that won't work. Rosa held up the empty bottle, then stood up. Maybe another bottle would help. Think it through. I think I have one inside. She walked to her door, and when she opened it, the light seemed to dissolve her robe as she looked back at me. You coming? She asked. I followed, entranced by the sway of her hips. She paused, and the chihuahua darted under a chair. The bottle's in my bedroom, she said, pointing to an open door. As I stepped closer, she turned and smiled wickedly, her robe open. I pulled her against me, and she grinned wider. I warned you. Manipulating men is what some women do best, Rosa said, hooking a leg around me. She started to speak, but I kissed her. She shrugged off her robe, and I carried her to the bedroom, the chihuahua howling from under the chair. Later, Rosa lay half across me, waking up. She smiled. Wow, you must have been saving that up. I'm a little tender. She glanced at the floor. I'm throwing that pillow away. Yeah, washing won't help, I agreed. She laughed. I'll just buy a new one. I ran my fingers through her hair. I haven't had an active social life. You didn't hook up with that old lady at the club, she said. No, I replied. She laughed. I know you didn't. I was keeping an eye on you, I said. Fair. I had an eye on you too, she teased. And I lied. That stuff at the club was for your benefit. Rosa grew serious. I need to tell you the truth. I knew you'd be at the club. That's why I went. I'm going to eliminate Miguel, I muttered. He didn't know. He asked for a good place, so I decided to show up, Rosa explained. Why? I asked. Because I needed to stop being a witch. I've been angry since my ex-husband. I thought you might understand. Besides, I got a good look at you before you picked up that sombrero, pervert, she said. She giggled. So you wiggled your bum at me. It worked, didn't it? You drooled over me every time I went outside. Is that why you wear that robe? I asked. Sometimes I'm an exhibitionist. You've found my weakness, she admitted, and I squeezed her bum. A knock interrupted. Rosa put on her robe and answered the door while I got dressed. Rosa looked at me, puzzled. This girl needs to talk to you. Kelsey stepped in. Hey, Jose, got a minute? Rosa gets to hear it, I said. Okay, Kelsey sighed. But this doesn't go to Bjorn. Okay, I nodded. When the circus went bankrupt, I was screwed. I started street performing in small cons like Three-Card Monte, Kelsey began. Bjorn said you did street magic, I noted. Toughest kind. Just you and the marks. No stage sets, no assistants. She grinned. I was good at it. Rosa asked, what does that have to do with everything here? Kelsey blew out a breath. I heard stuff about big cons and helped on a couple. Bjorn thinks he rescued me before I got in too deep, and he mostly did. I didn't do anything really bad, but being broke in the city sucks. I don't want to tarnish what he did. He doesn't deserve that. I looked at Rosa, who smiled gently and laughed softly. I understand. Kelsey grinned at Rosa and gave an exaggerated wink before looking at me. I think you're looking at this the wrong way. Why? I asked. Because you're wondering why they're targeting you. This is just another big con, and you're not the mark. She paused. No offense, Joseph, but you can't be the mark. You don't have anything worth taking. She glanced at Rosa. No money or valuable stuff. I know, I grimaced. Then why set me up? Why try to put me back in prison? You're not the mark. You're part of the con. You're the distraction, Kelsey explained. I stared at her. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound good. It means you're the diversion. They want everyone looking at you, not them, she clarified. Rosa asked, how do we stop it? Kelsey grinned. Just convince the mark they're being conned. I had a sudden realization. Damn it, I'm an idiot. Why? Rosa asked, puzzled. The Seychelles. We were going to Fiji for our honeymoon, but Beth suddenly changed it to the Seychelles. Why does that matter? Rosa questioned. Banking laws. She sent me deep-sea fishing one day while she stayed at the spa. I bet she set up an account in person so there'd be no trail to her, I explained. Isn't there anyone you can call? Rosa asked. The SEC has a reporting mechanism, but that'd probably just tip them off, I said. I almost choked on the tequila. Who watches the Watchmen? Rosa smiled. Why not both the DOJ and the FBI? The FBI and IRS have websites for reporting fraud, so I used the library computer to report it, hoping it would cause enough trouble for Beth and her cohorts to leave me alone. I reported to P.O. Anderson and worked with Miguel and the crew until the end of the harvest. Then I found a job making donuts, which was easier, but I missed the old crew. The hours matched Rosa's, and we were pretty much living together, so life was good. But it couldn't stay that easy. As I was nuzzling Rosa's neck and grabbing her bum while she set the table, a harsh knock sounded. Rosa glared at the door, trying to calm her breathing. Damn it. If Leonard's here to borrow my robe again, the answer is no. It wasn't Leonard. It was 2 deputies and a couple of guys in suits. I recognized the deputies. The older plainclothes man held up his credentials. Joseph Bateman, I nodded, seeing Leonard and Maisie peering out from Leonard's trailer. I'm Special Agent Tanner with the FBI. We need you to come to the field office to answer a few questions. Rosa clamped onto my arm. Are you arresting him? No, we just have a few questions. I looked at Rosa. I probably need to do this. She reluctantly let me go, but not before taking cell phone pictures of the agents and whispering something in Spanish to one of the deputies. He paled, likely from a pass-away threat. As we drove away, I saw Leonard and Maisie heading to Rosa's trailer. At the FBI field office, I was put in an interview room with nauseatingly white walls, gray carpet, and a dull gray table, and told to wait. After 20 minutes, a clean-cut guy in a black suit entered, placed his credentials on the table, opened a folder, and introduced himself. Mr. Bateman, I'm Senior Special Agent Michael Rivera from the Criminal Cyber Response and Services Branch in D.C. We received your tip and need clarification for an ongoing FBI-IRS investigation. We appreciate your assistance. I stared in surreal horror. Miguel! Ignoring my whisper, he pointed to a line item on the list. You mentioned the money may have been moved to an account in the Seychelles. We need to narrow down which institution your ex-wife may have used. For the next 2 hours, SSA Rivera went over every detail of the suspected plot. I had to handwrite and sign statements, review maps and honeymoon itineraries. all while Rivera acted like we'd never met. Thankfully, there were no references to Isabel, Bjorn, or Kelsey. They were supposed to be family. After we finished, he gave me a perfect government official handshake and thanked me for assisting in the investigation. I walked into Rosa's trailer with silence roaring in my ears. She was waiting for me. "Are you okay?" she asked, concerned. "Did you know about Michael?" I asked. "Michael who?" She recoiled. "Miguel." "What about Miguel? Is he okay?" she asked, worried. "He's an FBI agent," I revealed. The shock and disbelief on Rosa's face was the most comforting thing I could have seen. "Miguel? Are you serious?" "He told me he came out here because he had trouble in New York." Her voice trailed off, and she stood silent for a moment before launching into rapid Spanish. I was probably lucky I didn't understand. After a few minutes, I wondered if Liam would let me hide under the chair with him. "Rosa, I am so sorry," I apologized. She stopped and blinked. "For what?" "For even thinking you could have—" I trailed off. She shook her head. "You asked. You didn't accuse me of anything. That hijo de puta lied to us. His family. We saw the arrests and trial on TV. The FBI and IRS investigation into SEC corruption was in the news for a year. Beth took a plea deal, but still got 15 years after turning over the money she'd stashed overseas. The SEC investigator got 20 years with no plea deal. More people were involved than I thought, which made me uneasy considering Beth had drawn most of them into her plan. I was lucky I wasn't a CDC case study. Most got 5 years, though one IT guy only got 18 months. Rosa's only comment on Beth was, "You were married to that skinny witch. I thought you liked women with real bums." What can I say? I was deprived for 4 years. I'm making up for it now. She shot me a fake scowl, but the corner of her mouth twisted into a smile. "I know. I can't even wear shorts. You keep leaving tooth marks all over me." She still spent most of her time off wearing just her skimpy robe. If anything, her exhibitionist streak had gotten worse. I didn't argue, though she did occasionally have a tooth mark or two. The court was looking at vacating my conviction. During the investigation, someone admitted that Voorhees had planted the pills in my car. Beth had orchestrated it. I wasn't holding my breath, though. At the speed the courts moved, I'd be done with parole before they got to it. P.O. Anderson had gone hands-off and even told me about the move to vacate. Fish retired quietly without charges, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but Rosa said she suspected he wouldn't have gone through with it. That was good enough for me. For months after Beth's sentencing, Rosa and I met Bjorn and Kelsey at the salsa club. We also ran into them at street festivals and sometimes met at the club for dinner and drinks. Dancing with a double-jointed clown was a trip, and watching Kelsey perform street magic tricks on patrons never got old. One evening, we arrived early. I grabbed a table while Rosa freshened up. I had just waved a waitress over when Miguel pulled out a chair. "I'll get this round, man. I owe you one." Miguel spoke to the waitress briefly and then sat down. "Miguel? Or is it Michael?" I asked. He sighed. "Miguel, you might want to keep a clear path to the door. Rosa's pissed at you." "Yeah, I figured. You earned that doing your job. I bought it. I thought you were my friend. You're good. Lots of training." Bjorn told me he suspected something. He just didn't think FBI. He thought maybe State Narcotics Task Force, I said. "I wasn't even there for you, you know. We had an op running, but came up empty. I was already in place when the employment agency dropped you there. Blind luck," Miguel explained. "The FBI stalks? Low-level pill parolees? Really? What kind of crap is that?" I asked, incredulous. "Everyone was convinced you had the money hidden. Probably 6 agencies watching, waiting for you to run. Took me a while to suspect you weren't in on it," Miguel admitted. "Why didn't you say something?" I demanded. "I couldn't be sure for a while. Once we learned an SEC investigator was involved, I was stuck. The rules are simple. The FBI should have investigated, but none of our evidence was legal, and the politics were complicated. We couldn't legally initiate an investigation with what we had," he said. "But if somebody lodged a whistleblower complaint, you'd have probable cause," I suggested. He nodded. "It worked, didn't it? We figured out why she kept targeting you after you were out. You were supposed to be the fall guy, but they didn't realize that. There wasn't enough evidence to really railroad you. So, when you got out after a few months, the SEC and IRS were on high alert. Beth couldn't touch the money without drawing attention. If I went back to prison for a long time, the pressure would be off and she'd be free and clear," I concluded. "That's too cold," Miguel said, shaking his head. Yeah, I interviewed her. She's probably a full-blown sociopath. They're drawn to money and power and end up in politics, law, and finance. Cold as ice and damn good liars. Convincing as hell, I said. Kind of the pot calling the kettle black there, Miguel, I noted. He shrugged. Fair, still. You're lucky you're alive. She probably figured liquidating you would draw too much attention. She did ask about you, though, wondering why you hadn't tried to see her and talk. What the hell is there to talk about? She was never who I thought she was, I said bitterly. Miguel put his beer down. If she's like other sociopaths I've met, she wants to know she won in some way. See you break down or get upset. See your reaction when you realize you were played. He laughed. It really pissed her off when I told her you screwed up her plan, cost her all the money, and put her in prison. Pretty one-sided win there. I was just trying to stop everything, I said. I know, but it worked for me. Sociopaths are usually narcissists. She tried to show how she won by explaining stuff we didn't know, put 2 more a-holes behind bars, and recovered a bit more money, Miguel concluded. Rosa suddenly appeared by the table, glaring at Miguel. She hissed something, and he raised his hands in surrender. I know. My mom relayed your, opinion to me. I'll never hear the end of it, so thanks, Miguel said. Rosa glanced between us. I shrugged. He's explaining what happened. She pulled a chair next to mine, gripping my arm possessively and still glaring at Miguel. He took a sip of his beer. What else do you want to know? I asked. How many people were involved? Are you sure you want to know? Miguel asked, frowning. 10, but 2 were women. 11 if you count the IT geek who botched the frame job on you. He only got a few blowjobs in the server room. He rolled on everyone as soon as we pressured him. He got 18 months, Miguel explained. 18 months in prison for a few blowjobs. Damn, I shook my head. Rosa elbowed me with a grin. Mine aren't worth that. Of course they are, I replied. Oh God, too much information. Miguel held his hands up as Rosa laughed wickedly. Things got quiet, the joking reminding us of how close we'd been. I turned my beer bottle a few times. What do you want, Miguel? I asked. I wanted to set things right. Family, you know, he said. I had bitter replies in my head, but let them go. Are we Jose and Miguel? Yeah, cousins. Michael and Joseph, not so much, Miguel replied. I looked at Rosa. I think I can live with that. She studied him. You ever do that again, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Her tone was certain, not venomous. He nodded. I know, and I deserve it. Thanks for giving me a chance to make things right. Rosa nodded, mollified by his apology. He finished his beer. I need to apologize to Isabel. I talked to Bjorn and Kelsey. That's how I knew you'd be here. Bjorn understands, but Kelsey will take a while. She doesn't trust easily, but when she does, it's wholehearted. I messed that up. I nodded. Despite Kelsey's street smarts, she had a precious naivete that Rosa loved. He stood up, pulled an envelope from his back pocket, and smiled. With a bit of irony, I asked if I could deliver this personally. What is it? I asked, wary. The adjudication on the IRS reward money for reporting tax evasion. It's not a fortune, but it should help. It's a percentage of the taxes owed on underreported income minus taxes and other deductions. But it'll help you get back on your feet, he said. He paused. If they vacate your conviction, will you go back to your job? I shook my head. No, there will always be suspicion. No one would sponsor me for a Series 7 again. The donut shop owner is thinking about selling. I'm managing it now and looking into bank loans. It's affordable, and the profits are good. Miguel snickered. A big shot donut shop owner. Jesus, you're saying it wrong. He works at the shop. I hired him and Alejandro, I corrected. Still hard to picture, Miguel said. Money is just money, Miguel. I have family now, I said. I saw a flash of pain before he walked away. I opened the envelope and sorted the papers. The total was over $500,000. I showed it to Rosa. She smiled. No problem buying the donut shop now, and we can get you a nicer engagement ring. She studied her quarter-carat ring. No, I'm keeping this one. You worked hard to save up for it. That means a lot more. I squeezed her thigh. What are we going to do with the money left over after buying the shop? She looked up. There are a lot of empty lots in the trailer park. Maybe we could get a double-wide trailer with a big deck to have everyone over, like Leonard and Maisie. Maybe even Miguel in a month or two. She looked at the door. I nodded. With a barbecue grill, patio furniture, and a good stereo system, that sounds about right. Rosa leaned against me. Maybe we could make one of the bedrooms a nursery, in the future. Her voice was measured, but I heard her uncertainty. Maybe not too far in the future, okay? Maybe get a 4-bedroom one. You never know, I said, trying to reassure her. Rosa sighed. Maybe I'll be the one leaving tooth marks on your bum tonight, she teased. Pervert, I said, and she giggled. You better believe it, Rosa replied.
Southern France, in a small peaceful town near Marseille. The house sits on the outskirts, surrounded by olive groves and vineyards, with picturesque views of the French countryside. Leo, 36, is an accomplished architect, and Isabelle, 34, works as a freelance graphic designer. They've been married for 10 years and have an 8-year-old son named Adrien. Pierre, Leo's younger brother, is a 32-year-old real estate agent who visits frequently. It was a Thursday evening, late summer, when Leo's world changed forever. He had always been a man of structure, someone who believed that if you followed the rules, life would follow suit. His days were organized: work, family, a bit of relaxation in the evening. He had his dream job, a beautiful family, and a cozy home, surrounded by the gentle charm of the French countryside. But behind the picture-perfect life lurked a shadow he never saw coming. That evening, Leo was supposed to attend a client meeting that would stretch well into the night. His career as an architect had been demanding lately, but Isabelle, his wife, had always been supportive. She often joked about how their house was his first project, given how meticulously he had designed it from the ground up. Every detail of their home reflected Leo's touch, from the polished oak floors to the wide windows that invited the golden sunsets of Provence into their living room. The house was a labor of love, and Isabelle had been his muse for every step of the process. But tonight, Leo's meeting was canceled. His client, a wealthy investor from Paris, had to reschedule. Leo smiled at the thought of an unexpected evening at home with his family. He decided not to call Isabelle, hoping to surprise her with her favorite dessert, eclairs, from a small bakery in town. Leo imagined her delighted face when he walked through the door earlier than expected. The simple joy of their quiet evening together. The bakery, a small establishment run by an elderly couple, was on the edge of the town square. The scent of fresh pastries filled the air as Leo approached, and he could already taste the creamy filling of the eclairs in his mind. After exchanging pleasantries with the owners, he made his way back home, his heart light. He thought of Adrien, their 8-year-old son, who was probably deep in his homework by now. Adrien was a bright boy, full of curiosity and an eagerness to learn, much like Leo had been at his age. Leo couldn't wait to sit with him and go over his school projects, as he often did after dinner. As he neared the house, Leo noticed something odd: a car parked just down the street. It looked familiar: his brother Pierre's silver sedan. Pierre had been visiting frequently over the past few months. At first, Leo was glad to see more of him. Their bond had always been close. Pierre was charming, outgoing, and a natural flirt, but Leo never thought much of it. They were brothers, after all. Leo brushed off the thought. Pierre probably dropped by for a chat, or maybe to help with something around the house. He hadn't mentioned any plans to visit, but that wasn't unusual. Pierre was spontaneous, often arriving unannounced. Leo didn't mind, and Isabelle seemed to enjoy Pierre's company too. They often laughed together, shared jokes that Leo sometimes missed, but he assumed it was just harmless sibling-like banter. Opening the door quietly, Leo stepped into the hallway. The house was unusually quiet. He could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the kitchen and the soft rustling of papers from Adrien's room. Leo smiled, imagining his son buried in his homework, completely focused as always. He set the pastry box down on the kitchen counter and paused. There was something unsettling about the silence. The house felt off. He made his way toward Adrien's room, intending to check in on his son first. As he reached the door, he peeked in. and saw Adrian hunched over his desk, his small hand gripping a pencil as he scribbled away. His brows were furrowed in concentration, and Leo felt a surge of pride. He gently closed the door without disturbing Adrian and turned to head upstairs to their bedroom. That's when he heard it, the faint sound of laughter. It was coming from upstairs, from their bedroom. At first, Leo thought it must be the television, or perhaps Isabel on the phone with a friend. But as he climbed the stairs, the laughter grew louder, more intimate. A shiver ran down his spine. Something felt wrong. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and Leo could hear the muffled sounds of movement. Unmistakable now, the kind of sounds that could only mean one thing. His heart began to race, and he stood frozen in place, unwilling to push the door open, yet knowing he had to. With a trembling hand, Leo nudged the door, and it swung open just enough for him to see inside. What he saw made the blood drain from his face. There, tangled in the sheets, were Isabel and Pierre, his wife and his brother, their bodies entwined. In an act of betrayal so profound, it took Leo a moment to even comprehend what he was seeing. Isabel's hair was tousled, her skin flushed, and Pierre, the man he had trusted his whole life, was there beside her, shirtless, with a look of satisfaction that turned to horror the instant he saw Leo standing in the doorway. The world seemed to stop. The room spun around Leo, and he felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under him. The box of eclairs slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor with a dull thud, the pastries spilling out in a mess of cream and chocolate. Forgotten in the chaos of the moment, Isabel gasped, pulling the sheets up to cover herself, her face pale and wide-eyed with shock. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for you to." But the words stuck in her throat, and she trailed off, knowing there was nothing she could say to make this right. Pierre scrambled to gather his clothes, his face flushed with shame and guilt. "Leo, I'm so sorry. This isn't what it looks like. His voice was desperate, but even he couldn't find the words to excuse what he had done. Leo stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. How long had this been going on behind his back? He had always trusted them both implicitly. His wife, the mother of his child, and his brother, his closest friend. And now, here they were, tearing his world apart in the most cruel and unforgivable way. For a moment, the only sound in the room was Leo's heavy breathing, the weight of betrayal pressing down on his chest like a stone. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't look at the bed, the sheets, the room that had once been a sanctuary for his marriage. It all felt tainted now, like a lie he had been living without even knowing it. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door creaking open behind him. "Adrian." "Papa," came the soft voice of his son, full of innocence and curiosity. "Are you home?" Leo's heart sank even further. Adrian didn't know what had just happened, didn't know the world he knew was crumbling. He quickly closed the bedroom door behind him, blocking Adrian from seeing the nightmare inside. "Yes, Adrian," Leo called, his voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging within him. "I'm home. Go finish your homework. I'll be there soon, okay?" "Okay, Papa," Adrian chirped and disappeared back into his room, oblivious to the shattered reality just a few feet away. Leo turned back to Isabel and Pierre, his gaze cold and unforgiving. "How long?" he asked, his voice low but filled with an unmistakable edge. Isabel looked down, unable to meet his eyes, her lip trembling. It just happened. We didn't mean for it to. I don't know how it got this far." Leo's fists clenched at his sides. "My own brother?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "How could you do this, Pierre? How could you both do this to me? To Adrian?" Pierre, his face now a mask of shame, shook his head, his voice hollow. "I'm sorry, Leo. I never wanted to hurt you." The room felt suffocating, the weight of betrayal pressing in from all sides. Leo couldn't bear to be in the same space as them any longer. He turned away, his chest tight with rage and heartbreak. "Get out," he said, his voice hoarse. "Both of you. I can't look at either of you right now." Isabel reached out, her voice pleading. "Leo, please, don't do this. We can talk about this. I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you." But Leo didn't turn around. "You should have thought of that before. Leave, now." Pierre was the first to move, quickly pulling on his clothes and slipping out of the room without another word, his face a mask of regret. Isabel lingered, tears streaming down her face. But she knew it was too late. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. With one last look at Leo, Isabel gathered her things and left the room, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. Leo stood alone in the bedroom, his heart heavy with the weight of betrayal. The room felt empty, cold, despite the warm glow of the setting sun that filtered through the windows. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Adrian. He had to be strong for Adrian. He walked down the hallway, pausing outside his son's room. Leo knocked softly before stepping inside. Adrian looked up from his homework, his bright eyes filled with innocence, completely unaware of the storm that had just passed. "Did you get the eclairs, Papa?" Adrian asked, a hopeful smile tugging at his lips. Leo smiled softly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I did, but we'll have them later. Let's finish your homework first, okay?" Adrian nodded enthusiastically and returned to his work, completely content in the small bubble of his world. Leo sat beside him, helping him with his math problems, though his mind was far away, lost in the wreckage of what had just happened. He knew that life would never be the same, that trust once broken was almost impossible to rebuild. But for now, he had to focus on what mattered most. His son. Adrian was his anchor in the storm, the one thing that kept him grounded when everything else had fallen apart. Conclusion. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and resilience. How would you handle such a devastating discovery? Have you ever experienced something similar? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories that explore the complexities of relationships and life. If you have any questions about the story or want to share your insights, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective.
James and Lena Morgan's marriage seemed perfect to the outside world. He was a successful lawyer, and she was a talented interior designer, but beneath the surface, their lives were unraveling. While James was consumed by his career, Lena found herself growing distant, craving excitement and passion that her husband no longer provided. Enter Ryan Harris, a charming fitness trainer with a talent for manipulation, who quickly became the spark Lena was searching for. As their secret affair deepened, James remained oblivious, trusting his wife and his best friend, Sophia, who had grown suspicious of Lena's behavior. But when James accidentally uncovers evidence of the betrayal, he must confront the reality that his perfect life is a lie. What follows is a storm of deception, revenge, and heartache, one that will test the limits of trust, loyalty, and love. Will James unravel the truth in time, or will he lose everything to the darkness of betrayal? The sun set over the city skyline, casting an orange glow over the luxury apartment that James and Lena had spent years building together. Their life seemed picture-perfect to the outside world. James was a successful corporate lawyer at one of the top law firms in the city, while Lena ran her own flourishing interior design business. They had everything: wealth, status, a beautiful home, and a love story that people envied. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. James was often busy with work, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. His career was his life, and Lena was understanding, at least she appeared to be. But as time passed, Lena became increasingly withdrawn. Her late-night dinners with friends, spontaneous weekends away, and growing distance from James became more frequent. James, too preoccupied with his own ambitions, barely noticed the shift at first. He trusted Lena implicitly and believed her when she said she needed me time to decompress. She always reassured him that everything was fine, but the smile in her eyes seemed to be fading, replaced by a coldness he couldn't explain. It was a Tuesday evening when the first seed of doubt was planted in James's mind. He had come home after a grueling 14-hour day at the office. As he walked through the door, he noticed Lena's purse lying on the kitchen counter. Normally, Lena was meticulous about putting everything in its place, but this was unusual. He picked it up and noticed something strange: a hotel receipt. The receipt was for a 2-night stay at an upscale resort just outside the city. But the name on the receipt wasn't Lena's. James's heart skipped a beat. He immediately assumed it was a mistake. Perhaps Lena had booked the room for a business trip, but the details felt off. "Lena!" he called out. His voice was calm, but inside, a storm of questions was brewing. Lena came down the stairs, her hair still damp from a shower. "Hey, babe, what's up?" James held up the receipt. "What's this? Why is there a hotel receipt for 2 nights? You didn't tell me you were going away." Lena's face shifted for a brief moment, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Oh, it's just a mix-up. I went to the spa last weekend with a friend. We stayed at that resort for a night. It was nothing, just a small getaway. I forgot to mention it." James nodded, but something didn't sit right. He tried to convince himself that it was nothing, but the nagging feeling in his chest wouldn't go away. The following week, Sophia called James after seeing something that disturbed her. She'd run into Lena and Ryan Harris, the local fitness trainer, at a restaurant. They were sitting too close, laughing too intimately for friends, the way she smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. James couldn't stand the uncertainty any longer. One evening, he returned home early from work, determined to confront Lena. He found her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. He sat down beside her, his heart racing. "Lena, we need to talk," he said, his voice firm but filled with hurt. Lena looked at him, surprised by his tone. "What's going on, James? You seem off." James took a deep breath, his mind racing through all the things that had been building up. "I know what's been going on," he said, his voice steady. "I know about you and Ryan." Lena's face drained of color. She quickly stood up, shaking her head. "What are you talking about? You're being paranoid." "I'm not," James said, his voice growing colder. "I know about the hotel receipt, the dinners, the secret getaways. I know about the affair." Lena's eyes filled with guilt, and she looked down, unable to meet his gaze. "James, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to find out this way. But yes, I've been seeing Ryan. I don't know how it happened. You've been so busy, and I felt so alone. I wasn't getting the attention I needed. I didn't mean to hurt you." James felt the ground slip from under him. The pain was unbearable. His heart shattered as he processed the words. Lena, his wife, had betrayed him. "You don't know how much this hurts," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Lena's face twisted in regret, but it was too late. The trust had been broken, and James knew there was no going back. "I don't know what I was thinking, but I can't undo what I've done." In the following days, James struggled with his emotions. He wanted revenge. He wanted to make Lena and Ryan pay for what they had done. But he also knew he needed to be strategic. He couldn't let his anger control him. He had to think this through. James enlisted the help of a private investigator, someone he knew would gather the evidence he needed without raising suspicion. The investigator followed Ryan for weeks, gathering photos, videos, and evidence of Ryan's manipulative behavior with other women. James wasn't just going to expose the affair. He was going to make sure Ryan's reputation was ruined. A month passed. James had everything in place. He knew the truth, and now it was time to confront Ryan. One evening, James invited Ryan to a casual dinner at a high-end restaurant. The two men had always been cordial, but tonight, James had no intention of pretending everything was fine. As they sat down, Ryan, unaware of what was coming, ordered a drink, trying to relax. James kept his composure, but beneath the surface, he was seething with anger. "Ryan," James began, his voice calm but filled with authority, "I know about you and Lena. I know about the affair, and I know what you've been doing." Ryan laughed, trying to deflect the situation. "James, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're overreacting." James slid a folder of photographs across the table. "I don't think I am. These are just a few of the things I have on you. Your history, your manipulation, your lies." Ryan's face paled as he realized the gravity of the situation. "You can't do this. You have no proof." "I have all the proof I need," James replied. "And I'm going to make sure everyone knows who you really are." The fallout was swift and brutal. James released the evidence to the public, exposing Ryan's true nature and the affair. Lena, now facing the consequences of her actions, was left alone and broken. James filed for divorce. He moved on with his life, not out of bitterness, but because he had learned that sometimes the hardest thing you can do is let go. Lena tried to reach out, but James no longer cared. He had reclaimed his life, his self-respect, and his peace of mind. James stood at the edge of a new chapter in his life. He had been through the darkness and emerged stronger. He had learned that betrayal wasn't just about another person. It was about how you choose to handle it. The experience had reshaped him. As he stood outside his office, looking out at the skyline, he knew he had taken back control. The truth always finds its way to the surface, he thought, his heart at ease. Thank you so much for watching. The Unseen Betrayal. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think James handled the situation the right way? What would you have done in his shoes? Let us know. Thanks again, and take care.
You know, I always thought Amelia and I had the perfect marriage. We've been together for almost 10 years, and everything seemed fine. No, better than fine. We had the same interests. We were building our life together, and I thought she was happy. But lately, things started feeling off. You know when something just doesn't sit right? Yeah, that's how it felt with her. She started acting distracted, and I could feel her pulling away, declining family dinners, canceling plans with friends, all while working more. At first, I tried to chalk it up to stress or maybe something happening at her job, but the more I noticed, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. The first red flag came when I found this old letter she kept. Nothing dramatic at first, just a few lines about an old friend from her past. Weird, sure, but people hold on to all sorts of stuff, right? But it stuck with me. I remember thinking, who the hell is this guy? She's calling her old friend? And why hadn't I ever heard about him in our decade together? That's when the distance started creeping in. She wasn't the same Amelia anymore. We used to talk, really talk about everything, what we wanted in life, how we'd get there. Now, it's like talking to a brick wall. The late nights at work became more frequent. She'd barely look at me when we were together. And the excuses? God, they just didn't add up. Then came the receipts. Restaurants. Places I knew we'd never been to. Not together anyway. Fancy dinners. Way out of the way. I'm sitting here thinking, who the hell is she having dinner with? And I'm not talking fast food. I'm talking white tablecloth, wine by the bottle type places. She'd say it was work, but come on. Who the hell goes to work dinners 4 nights a week? I started digging a little deeper. It's not like I could confront her without proof. So I installed this GPS tracker in her car, slipped some software onto her phone. Don't get me wrong, I felt sick to my stomach doing it. But at this point, I had to know. I needed something. I couldn't just sit around while she went out God knows where with God knows who. That's when I found out about the hotel. Every couple of weeks, she was heading out to this hotel, not even far away, just on the outskirts of town. I'd track her going there, staying for a couple of hours, then heading back home like nothing had happened. Like everything was normal. There were so many little things that started to make sense, like how she'd react when we'd be out with friends, especially when certain topics would come up. One time we were at dinner with some close friends, and someone brought up old relationships, just as a joke. Amelia froze. Like completely froze. She changed the subject so fast that everyone noticed. It was weird and I couldn't let it go. It got even worse when I started getting these calls. Anonymous numbers, whispering crap like, "You don't know the whole story about your wife, and she's got a double life, man." I mean, what the hell? At first, I thought it was some prank, but after everything else, I wasn't so sure. It was starting to feel like my whole life was built on some bullshit fantasy that was falling apart right in front of me. Then came the final nail in the coffin. A chance meeting with one of Amelia's old acquaintances. Someone she'd never mentioned to me. We bumped into this guy at the grocery store of all places. Casual conversation at first, but when he started talking about the past, things didn't add up. He mentioned stuff Amelia never told me. Places she'd been, people she knew, things that completely contradicted what she'd shared with me. It was like I was learning about a stranger, not my wife. By this point, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know the truth. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to dig deeper. I was about to uncover things that would change everything. Things that would make me question not just my marriage, but everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. It's funny how you think you know someone. I thought I had Amelia figured out. I thought I knew every little thing about her life before we met. Her childhood, her family, even her exes. But after that encounter with her old acquaintance, I knew something was seriously off. And I couldn't let it go. Not after the hotel trips, the sketchy receipts, and those weird anonymous calls. It wasn't just our marriage on the line anymore. It was everything I thought I knew about her. That's when I started digging into her phone. I know it sounds messed up, but I had to. The GPS tracker already told me she was sneaking around to that hotel, but now I needed to know who she was meeting there. So I pulled up her messages. You wouldn't believe what I found. There he was, the old friend. The messages were all coded, like she was trying to cover her tracks. But after reading through enough of them, it became obvious. They talked about meeting up, sharing moments from their past, places they used to go. But here's the kicker. None of it lined up with what Amelia had told me about her past. The stories she'd shared about her life before me, all bullshit. Suddenly, I wasn't just wondering if she was cheating. I was starting to realize that everything the last 10 years of our life together could have been built on lies. The worst part? She didn't just refer to him as some old buddy. No, she called him her old friend, but the way she spoke to him, it was like I was reading some shitty romance novel. They weren't just reconnecting. There was history there, something deep. That's when I knew I couldn't handle this on my own anymore. I wasn't about to confront her without having the full picture. I needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence. So, I did what anyone would do in my situation. I hired a private investigator. The guy I hired, Mike, was a pro. He didn't ask too many questions. He just wanted to know the basics. I gave him all the info, her schedule, the hotel visits, everything. And then I waited. That's when the paranoia really kicked in. Every time Amelia left the house, I wondered if this would be the day I'd find out what the hell was really going on. Every night, she came home late, I found myself staring at her, trying to figure out if she was lying straight to my face. It didn't take Mike long to start sending me updates. And trust me, the shit he uncovered, it rocked me to my core. Turns out, Amelia's old friend wasn't just some dude from her past. He was her ex-husband. Yeah, the same one she told me she left years ago, claiming he was a bad influence and that she wanted nothing to do with him. Well, apparently, that was just another lie in her endless web of bullshit. They'd been in contact for God knows how long, meeting up behind my back like nothing had changed between them. She even traveled to see him when she said she was away for work. I felt sick, but it didn't stop there. Mike sent me photos, pictures of her with him. And not just casual stuff either. We're talking about romantic dinners, hand-holding, kissing in public like they were some star-crossed lovers. Then there were the videos, ones that made it clear they weren't just meeting for drinks. And on top of that, Mike found evidence that she wasn't just seeing her ex. There were other men too, other hotel meetings. It was like every corner I turned, there was more filth waiting for me. I remember sitting at the table with the stack of evidence Mike had given me, just staring at the photos, the videos, all the proof that my wife was a fucking fraud. It's like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I had no idea who I was married to anymore. Was anything she'd ever told me true? The worst part was, I couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until I figured out my next move. But it was eating me alive. My friends, our friends, started noticing something was off. We'd all be hanging out, and they'd make these stupid jokes about relationships and infidelity, not knowing I was living in the middle of it. Amelia was sitting there, laughing along with them, and I'm just gritting my teeth, trying not to explode. There was this one day in particular. We were at a barbecue, and one of my buddies started cracking jokes about how all wives have their secrets. It was meant to be lighthearted, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Amelia was right there, sipping her drink, pretending like she didn't have a care in the world, like she wasn't sneaking off to hotels with her ex and God knows who else. I wanted to scream at her right then and there, to rip her perfect little facade apart in front of everyone. But I didn't. I played it cool, smiled through the pain. No one knew the truth. Not yet. After that day, things with my friends started to get tense. I didn't want to hang out anymore. Didn't want to be around people who didn't know what was really going on. How could they? I was lying to them just like she was lying to me. And I hated it. Mike kept digging, and the more he found, the angrier I got. I couldn't stop thinking about how I was going to make her pay. But not yet. No, this wasn't the time to blow up. I had to play the long game, just like she had. She thought she was so clever, hiding all these secrets, playing me for a fool. But she had no idea what was coming. After everything I found out, confronting Amelia would have been too easy. I didn't want her just to admit to what she was doing. That would have been letting her off the hook. I needed to hit her where it really hurt. Her career, her reputation, and everything she'd built for herself. The same way she had been slowly tearing apart everything we had, I was going to do the same to her. But I wasn't in a rush. No, I was going to take my time with this. First things first, I needed to get my affairs in order, literally. Divorce was inevitable, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with anything. I contacted a lawyer, a shark, someone who knew how to handle situations like mine. We didn't just talk about splitting assets. We talked strategy. The first thing he told me was to get everything in writing. Emails, messages, photos, videos, anything I could get my hands on that would show the court just how deceitful Amelia had been. It wasn't just about cheating anymore. It was about ruining her in every possible way. Then there was Sophie. Now, I'll be honest, she wasn't part of the plan at first. She was just a colleague, someone I worked with from time to time. Young, attractive, sure, but I hadn't really paid much attention to her before. That all changed when she started flirting with me. Little compliments here and there, lingering looks, and it didn't take long before I realized she was interested. And you know what? After everything Amelia had done, I wasn't about to turn down that kind of attention. I needed a distraction, and Sophie was perfect for that. But more than that, I could use her. Our first few meetings were purely professional, grabbing lunch during work or having coffee in between meetings. But it didn't take long for things to shift. I started looking forward to seeing her. The way she'd laugh at my jokes, the way she'd touch my arm when she talked to me. I knew exactly where this was heading, and I let it happen. It wasn't like I was emotionally involved. I mean, how could I be after what Amelia had done to me? Sophie was just another tool in my plan, and I was going to use her to my advantage. The first time we hooked up, I made sure to record it. Every kiss, every whisper, every little moment, I documented it all. It wasn't about the sex, although I'll admit, it felt good to have someone who actually wanted to be around me. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this was just another weapon in my arsenal. When the time came, I was going to use it all against Amelia. She thought she had secrets? Well, so did I. Meanwhile, I wasn't just sitting around waiting for the perfect moment to drop the bomb. I was already starting to lay the groundwork. Through my connections, I began to spread subtle rumors about Amelia at her workplace. It wasn't hard. People love gossip, especially when it's about someone who's been climbing the corporate ladder as quickly as she had. It started small. Whispers about her personal life, comment about her taking long trips, about how she seemed distracted at work. I didn't even have to do much. People's imaginations took care of the rest. I even started forging a few documents. Nothing crazy, just little things that made it seem like she was mismanaging things at work. I knew a few people in her professional circle who had it out for her anyway. I made sure they had the right information at their disposal. Before long, Amelia's reputation started to take a hit. People were questioning her professionalism, her ability to manage her team, and even her loyalty to the company. All the while, Amelia had no idea what was happening. She still came home, still pretended everything was fine. She was still sneaking off to meet her ex, probably thinking I was too blind or too stupid to notice. But I noticed everything. I controlled everything now, and she had no clue. Things with Sophie continued to develop. At first, I didn't think much of it, but over time, I started to actually enjoy being around her. She was easy to talk to, fun, and completely different from the cold, distant version of Amelia I had to deal with every day. We started spending more time together, after work on weekends. She thought it was becoming something real, and honestly, I was starting to feel that too. But I wasn't about to let my guard down. Not after what had happened with Amelia. I was in control this time. I kept Sophie in the dark about the full extent of what was going on. She didn't know that I was using her as part of my revenge plan. She thought she was just a girl falling for a guy whose marriage was falling apart. And maybe, in some twisted way, that was true. But this wasn't about her. This was about destroying Amelia. As the weeks went by, I could feel things moving toward the inevitable confrontation. Amelia was starting to feel the pressure at work. She'd come home stressed out, complaining about her colleagues being distant, about people questioning her decisions. She couldn't figure out why her career was suddenly on the rocks. And I just sit there, nodding along, pretending to be the supportive husband, while knowing damn well I was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. But I wasn't done yet. No, there was more to come. I was going to hit her where it hurt most, and when it all came crashing down, she wouldn't even know what hit her. I wasn't wasting any more time. Amelia had to feel it. Everything I'd been feeling since I discovered her betrayal. It was time for the first blow, the one she wouldn't see coming. I made sure the evidence of her infidelity landed in the hands of exactly the right person, one of her biggest professional rivals. You see, Amelia had clawed her way up in her career, making a few enemies along the way. She liked to play the part of the perfect professional, always smiling and shaking hands. But behind the scenes, she was ruthless. I knew just the person who'd love to see her taken down a peg. It was almost too easy. I dropped some well-timed anonymous hints, shared a few photos that couldn't be explained away, and within days, the rumor mill started spinning. By the time Amelia walked into the big client event, the whispers were already spreading like wildfire. She had no clue, of course. Why would she? As far as she knew, she was still in control, keeping her dirty little secrets safe. That night, the event was packed. Everyone who mattered in her professional circle was there, clients, bosses, and the people who could make or break her career. I was there too, pretending to be the supportive husband, smiling at her side while she schmoozed and laughed with people who were about to turn their backs on her. It was almost poetic, really. I watched from a distance as the whispers reached her. First, it was just a few sideways glances. Then the quiet conversation started. Amelia noticed, of course. She's sharp. She knew something was off, but she couldn't figure out what. I could see the confusion growing on her face as she tried to navigate through the crowd, acting like everything was fine. And then the moment came. One of her colleagues, Someone who used to be in her corner cornered her. They didn't say much, but I could see the way they looked at her. The judgment, the disdain. They knew. And Amelia? She had no idea how they found out. She stood there, stunned, as the realization hit her. The perfect little world she'd built was starting to crack. I could tell she was rattled. She tried to pull me aside at one point, whispering about how weird people were acting, how something felt off. "Do you think someone's spreading rumors?" she asked, her voice shaky. I just shrugged, playing dumb. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said, hiding the smirk tugging at my lips. Meanwhile, things with Sophie were getting complicated. What started as something I used for revenge was starting to shift. We'd been meeting in secret, keeping things under the radar, but I could feel the tension building. It wasn't just about sex anymore, though that was part of it. Sophie was getting emotionally invested, and I could tell she was starting to sense that I wasn't just in this for the fun of it. She'd asked me more than once if I was sure I was ready to move on from Amelia, if this was really what I wanted. I lied, of course, told her what she wanted to hear. "Of course, I'm ready," I'd say, kissing her, knowing full well I was still focused on destroying Amelia. Sophie wasn't stupid, though. She was starting to see the cracks in my story, starting to suspect that I had other motives. But she was in too deep by now. She cared about me, at least she thought she did, and I knew she wasn't going to back out. But back to Amelia. After that event, things went downhill fast. Word had spread, and her professional reputation was taking a hit. Clients were questioning her integrity, colleagues were distancing themselves, and I watched it all play out with a sick sense of satisfaction. I'd set the wheels in motion, and there was no stopping it now. Still, she didn't have a clue that I was behind it all. She started acting paranoid, accusing people at work of talking behind her back, and even coming home and venting to me about it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the one pulling the strings, and she was too wrapped up in her own web of lies to see it. I started pushing her, little by little, trying to get her to admit what she'd done. I'd make comments about trust, about loyalty, about how secrets always come out in the end. But every time, she'd deny it, stubborn as hell, refusing to admit what was right in front of her. I'd look her in the eyes and ask, "Are you sure there's nothing you need to tell me?" And every time, she'd look right back and say, "No, of course not." It was infuriating, but also kind of satisfying. She thought she was still in control. She had no idea that the walls were closing in. And Sophie, well, she was starting to catch on. She wasn't dumb. She could feel the distance between us, even though we were still meeting up regularly. She'd ask me, "Are you just using me to get back at your wife?" And I'd always brush it off. But I could see the doubt in her eyes, the way she hesitated before letting things go further. I knew I had to make a choice soon. Either I was going to keep using Sophie as part of my plan, or I'd have to be honest with her. But for now, I was too focused on Amelia's downfall. The real show was just getting started, and I wasn't about to lose control of it. I'd been planning this moment for weeks. Every move I'd made, every piece of evidence I'd collected, it was all leading to this. The day I would expose everything and finally let Amelia know that I wasn't the clueless husband she thought I was. I wanted her to feel the humiliation, to understand the consequences of everything she'd done. And the best part? She had no idea it was coming. The lawyers had already been involved for a while, but this was the day we'd sit down and discuss the divorce terms. But before any paperwork was signed, I had one last trick up my sleeve. I made sure her lawyer would be there too. The guy looked smug, probably thinking he was going to get her a sweet deal. He had no idea the bomb I was about to drop. We sat in the meeting room, Amelia, her lawyer, my lawyer, and me. She was dressed in her usual professional style, confident as ever. But underneath that polished exterior, I could sense she was on edge. Her career had been in free fall for weeks, ever since the rumors about her affair started circulating. She was losing clients, colleagues weren't returning her calls, and her reputation was hanging by a thread. Still, she thought she had control over me, over this divorce. How wrong she was. I slid the folder across the table, Photos, texts, emails, everything that tied her to her ex-husband and the string of other men she'd been sneaking around with. I didn't say anything at first, just watched her face as she opened it and started flipping through the evidence. Her hands started shaking. "Where the hell did you get this?" she hissed, her voice low but full of panic. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out, Amelia? You've been lying to me for years. You didn't just cheat. You lied about your entire life. And now it's all out in the open." Her lawyer tried to keep his composure, but even he looked rattled. "We can discuss this privately," he said, already scrambling to figure out how they were going to salvage the situation. But I wasn't done. Not yet. "Oh, I'm not interested in keeping this private," I said, my voice steady. "In fact, I think it's time we bring this out into the light. I'm tired of the lies, and I'm tired of playing nice." Amelia's face went pale, and she knew what was coming. The final blow. I had planned a public event. One of those big corporate dinners where all the major players in her professional circle would be present. I'd arranged for the evidence to leak just before the event. By the time she showed up, everyone would know the truth. It went exactly as I expected. When she walked into the room that evening, you could feel the shift in energy. People stared, whispered, and started moving away from her like she had the plague. Amelia, still clueless about the full extent of what was happening, tried to make her usual rounds, smiling and pretending everything was normal. But then the questions started coming. First, it was subtle, small talk about her personal life, questions she couldn't dodge. Then someone, I don't even remember who, came out and said it outright. "So, how's your ex-husband doing? Still meeting up with him on the side?" Amelia's face fell. She tried to keep it together, but it was too late. The room had already turned against her. She stumbled through a half-baked excuse, trying to laugh it off, but nobody was buying it. It was over. She lost it. Right there, in front of everyone, Amelia broke down. She tried to justify herself, blaming me, blaming her job, even blaming the pressure of our marriage. But the more she talked, the worse it got. Nobody believed her anymore. The people who used to hang on her every word, the friends she thought she had, they all turned their backs on her. It was brutal, and I watched it all happen with a sense of cold satisfaction. After the event, things moved fast. The divorce was inevitable, but now I was in control. She knew it. Her lawyer knew it, and even my lawyer had a smug look on his face the whole time we negotiated the terms. Amelia tried to push back, tried to hold on to what little she had left, but I wasn't playing nice anymore. I made sure she lost a significant portion of our assets. All that hard work she'd put into her career, gone. The life we built together, shattered. We met again with the lawyers to finalize the terms. It was tense. Amelia sat across from me, looking like a shadow of the confident woman she used to be. Her lawyer was doing his best to salvage something for her, but there wasn't much he could do. The evidence was overwhelming. The affairs, the lies, the money she'd spent on her secret trips, all of it was laid out in black and white. Amelia tried to make eye contact with me a few times, probably thinking she could talk her way out of this like she always did. But I was done. I didn't say much, just nodded along as my lawyer tore apart every argument her side tried to make. By the end of the meeting, it was clear she was screwed. After the papers were signed, she tried one last time to reach out. "Dan, please can we talk? I didn't mean for any of this to happen. We can fix this. You don't have to do this." I didn't even bother looking at her. "There's nothing left to talk about, Amelia. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with them." And that was it. I walked out, leaving her there with the wreckage of her life. The divorce was finalized, and I came out on top. Amelia, on the other hand, she had nothing left. No career, no reputation, and no friends. She was completely alone. After the divorce was finalized, I finally felt it, a weight lifting off my chest, like I could finally breathe again. The months of scheming, tracking, planning, and executing my revenge had left me exhausted, but the satisfaction was undeniable. I had walked away with most of our assets, and Amelia? Well, her career was in ruins. The colleagues who once admired her had turned their backs, and her former lover didn't even want to be associated with her. She had nothing left, and I wasn't looking back. But what came next surprised me. It wasn't just the satisfaction of seeing Amelia's life crumble that gave me relief. It was the realization that I could finally close that chapter of my life for good. Amelia had been a toxic weight around my neck for years, but now, with her gone, I could focus on something new, something real. That's when things with Sophie started to shift. What began as a tool in my revenge plan had turned into something much more. Sophie and I had been seeing each other for months, and at first, I'll admit, it was all about getting back at Amelia. But somewhere along the line, it stopped being about her. Sophie became more than just a fling. I found myself looking forward to our time together, not just for the physical stuff, but for the connection we were building. It wasn't immediate, though. After what I'd been through, I wasn't about to throw myself into another relationship blindly. I kept my guard up, and Sophie knew it. She'd asked me about my past, about what I wanted moving forward, and for once, I didn't have all the answers. But I knew one thing. I was tired of revenge. I didn't want to live in the past anymore. I wanted something real, something that wasn't built on lies or manipulation. As the weeks turned into months, Sophie and I grew closer. We talked about our future, about starting fresh. Eventually, we made the decision to move out of the city, to leave behind the mess that had been my life with Amelia. We found a new place, nothing too flashy, but it felt like home. A place where we could start over, without the shadow of my past hanging over us. I even started thinking about opening a business with Sophie. She had always been sharp, business-minded, and together, we had a lot of potential. It wasn't just about building something professionally. It was about building something together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I wasn't consumed by anger or revenge anymore. I was focused on the future. Meanwhile, Amelia was spiraling. Word had gotten back to me that she'd left the city, trying to start over somewhere new. But her reputation had followed her. Every time she tried to land a new job, her past would catch up with her. No one wanted to hire someone who had been publicly exposed for the kind of betrayal she'd committed. Even her family, who had always supported her, started to distance themselves. They couldn't look past the lies, the affairs, the mess she'd made of her life. A few months after the divorce was finalized, Amelia tried to reach out to me. I don't know what she expected. Maybe she thought I'd be open to some kind of reconciliation, or that I'd feel guilty about what happened to her. But when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I didn't even hesitate. I ignored her call, just like I ignored the dozen messages she left after that. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I didn't know her anything. I heard through the grapevine that she had fallen into depression, that she was struggling to keep her life together with no job, no friends, and no one to turn to. There was a time when I might have felt bad for her, when I might have considered helping her. But not anymore. Amelia wasn't my problem. Not anymore. One evening, Sophie and I met up with some old friends, people who used to know Amelia, who had seen everything play out. They were shocked by how far I'd come. "You look like a new man," one of them said. "I can't believe how much has changed." And they were right. I wasn't the same man I had been when this whole thing started. I wasn't the bitter, angry guy who was obsessed with revenge. I'd changed, grown. I wasn't defined by what Amelia had done to me anymore. She was a part of my past, but she wasn't going to define my future. As the evening went on, the conversation turned to Amelia, and someone asked me how she was doing. I shrugged. I don't really know. I don't keep up with her anymore. They were surprised, of course. They expected me to care, to have some lingering feelings about her downfall. But I didn't. Amelia's life was her own mess to deal with. I had moved on, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Sophie and I left that night, hand in hand, walking down a new path together. My life had been torn apart, rebuilt, and transformed. And now, I was ready for whatever came next. Amelia was just a memory, a reminder of who I used to be and how far I'd come.